I'm Janet Noak.
And I'm Andrea Dillon. We are a mother-daughter CPA firm serving the United States business community with tax preparation services, tax planning, tax resolution, assurance and audits, and CFO outsourcing and consulting.
Thank you for listening to the WOW podcast, Words of Wealth from CPAs of Florida. Learn more at cpasofflorida.com or call us at 239-936-6144. Today we're going to talk about tax gotchas and new business filings. We're actually going to talk about some IRS letters received due to minor filing requirements not being met. Andrea, do you want to talk about that?
I do. So something that is unfortunately super common when we have a new client come in that whether they handled it themselves or whether they paid somebody, unfortunately, and it just didn't go well, it's most common when they think they're an S-Corp. So this conversation is not going to be if you should be an S-Corp. This is if you thought you were an S-Corp. And we're here in Florida. So for Florida, when we go on our state website, so to speak, to set up a company, you can't pick S-Corp. It is not an option. There is an extra form you have to file with the IRS to choose to be an S-Corp. Somebody's got to do that form. And when you do it yourself, people seem to think that they did it when they did it on the state website. Or if they paid somebody to do it, they think that's part of it, and that's why I'm paying them, is so that they do all this stuff for me. And it falls through the cracks so often. And really the first indicator is they'll file their tax return. They think all is good. They file their S-Corp tax return. And then maybe 6 or 8 months later, the IRS sends them a letter. And it's not scary at all. And it pretty much just says, in more official terms, hey, we didn't get your tax return. So they send it to their CPA or their accountant or whoever, who says, oh yeah, of course we filed it. You got your copy. Here's our proof of filing. You're all good. You can ignore that. You should never ignore that letter. That letter is an indication that there was a problem. So then we usually, they come to us, or when we talk to them, they're getting a second opinion. So we see this letter. I usually know what's going on. We figure out, whoops, the S-Corp election never actually happened. So by now, the next year's tax return is typically due. Previous CPA probably already filed it. And by the way, the IRS is rejecting these every single year because, hey, they're not an S-Corp. So now they have us come in. We step in and we fix it. So that form that was supposed to be filed way back when that got missed, say 2 years ago at this point, we can sometimes still do it, sometimes can't, bigger conversation than this, but if we can do it, we bring it all the way back to when the first time they filed that return and they thought it was done. But then we have to file each of those tax returns because even though they've already paid for them to be filed, they think they're all good. Well, the IRS has been rejecting them, so we've got to refile them. There's a big steep penalty that I'm not going to get into, but there is a penalty for not doing it on time. So now they've had to pay us to fix the S-Corp filing, to refile all the missing tax returns, to potentially try to get rid of the penalties that are stacking up from filing it late. Oh, by the way, the next year's tax return is now due. And it just creates this really big mess when they thought it was all handled right from the beginning. And I really hate it when they come in and they were working with someone and they paid somebody to do it for them. And that person just missed the boat on it. And now they're paying us all these fees to fix it. So it really is a really big mess. And it all starts with a lovely little letter that just says, hey, we didn't get your tax return. So that letter, if you ever get it, is a really big red flag that there's a problem. So then assuming you don't have that problem, maybe you're not an S-Corp, or you're thinking about it, but you haven't actually done it yet, or you're a different type of entity, there's other things that you should be thinking about. So Janet, I think that you wanted to talk about other gotchas and pitfalls that new business owners sometimes don't think about when they're starting up. So I'm going to shoot over to you and let you take it away.
I am. One of the most missed things is that people don't necessarily understand that if they open a business but they don't have any activity in that business, oftentimes they still have a filing requirement for that tax return. For instance, if you start a business the middle of December and you don't actually do anything with it, and then you decide to start filing your tax returns January 1st of the following year, it could be 3, 4, 5 years down the road that all of a sudden the IRS sends you a notice that you failed to file timely for the 2 weeks of December that you had the entity. Today, the penalty is $195 per shareholder per month. So if they go 3 years down the road, that's 36 months times 2 shareholders times $195. In other words, a lot of money in potential penalties that could be missed if you just think that just because you don't have any activity in the company that you don't have any tax return filing requirement. So that often happens where someone has an entity for a year or 2 years or even 3 years that they just never filed a tax return. So that's very important that you know that you have to file that return whether or not you had any activity. And the other thing that people often miss is the activity before they start actually doing business. So before you file the new entity filing, oftentimes you might have expenses. You might have some state filing fees, some supplies, some memberships. You might pay a franchisee fee. You might pay something. And all of those expenses are deductible once you file your initial tax return. So even if you didn't have any activity, oftentimes you might have a loss that would offset some other income on your tax return. So don't miss out on good record keeping to keep your best tax advantage of having your business. So I think that's everything I have for today, Andrea, on this topic. Any final thoughts?
No, this is, again, unfortunately something we see the massacre afterwards oftentimes because people, in their best interest, they think they can handle it, they try to handle it, and then eventually something happens and they say, oh, whoops, can't handle it. Can you please help me? So just try to be proactive with it. Whoever it is, if it's us, if it's somebody else, keep an open door with your CPA so that you're taking advantage of everything you can.
Whether you need a simple tax return completed or you have a tax matter to remedy, or even if you need expert CFO services and consulting, contact CPAs of Florida today at cpaoflorida.com and schedule a free consultation.